Experience is always better in a group. The Christian experience doubly so. We are just a group of gamers that love to talk about life, God, and video games in no particular order. So whether you're a newbie or a grizzled agent like us, we want to help each other roll the level.
Welcome to another edition of the Roll the Level podcast. My name is Matt, and we're very excited to dive into today's episode.
Woo!
We're going to talk about Jesus and video games and all of the things in between, because there are a lot of things in between. Before we get there, I do want to introduce my awesome co-hosts. With me today, I have Dame and Sarah. Dame, how you doing, buddy?
I am living the dream, man. As much as, you know, the dream is, kind of all over the place and stuff like that, you know, then it's...
And now in self-isolation.
Yeah. As best as possible, yes. I am doing my part to flatten the curve.
Yeah.
Good job, buddy. I appreciate that greatly. And Sarah, how are you doing?
I am great. I am living the quarantine life, but in Animal Crossing instead. So it's wonderful.
There you go.
I'm
So
already
are you
quarantined on
quarantining?
the island in the game, so...
Oh, there you go. I was
That's
going to say, are
how I'm
you quarantining in the game? That's the thing.
Yeah, it's pretty much already set up that way. So
Nice. It's like they planned.
I have my little my medical mask on too in the game. I bought like the first day, so I'm really all set.
Nice. That's pretty much amazing.
That just seems like such an odd accessory to have in a game. I realized that
It
it's
was
kind of...
literally the first day
Right?
it went on sale, and I'm like, oh, sure, yeah, that seems funny. Like I put my little mage outfit on, and you can't forget your mask. So
That's amazing.
I was happy.
That's so good.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, I am so glad to have you guys here with me today. And to our listeners, we're so glad that you guys are tuning in.
Indeed. Welcome.
Today I have a question for you guys.
Okay.
A great question. Also, I have had a lot of caffeine already
Oh,
this
boy.
morning, so I may talk exceptionally fast. Just
Sweet.
play it back a little bit slower. It's good. No, the question for today is actually, have you ever had a game just blow your expectations out of the water? Like you would just you went into a game expecting to be like, yeah, all right, this will be all right. And then you walked out just like, whoa, that has changed my
Absolutely.
life forever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Dame, why don't you start us out, buddy?
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with a game that was a little rough in its development. And after its release, it's had some issues on a couple of platforms that it was released on. But a game as a whole that the art direction, the gameplay, soundtrack, just went beyond what I was expecting, was a game called Bloodstained: Ritual of the Night.
Yes.
I was a huge fan of Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and if you followed the development of Bloodstained, this was a Kickstarter game, so it kind of ended up being that Kickstarter development purgatory there for a while.
Star Citizen.
Yeah. Has that game even released?
No.
I didn't think so.
It's in some weird beta. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
but
making gazillion dollars at it.
It's true.
so that Kickstarter launched around the same time as Mighty Number 9 as well. So so when Mighty Number 9 released and there was that oh, hey, it's not quite as good as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
My expectations for Bloodstained were a little bit lower, but I was expecting a Metroidvania style game that, was okay because of where it came from. But yeah, I mean, the game mechanics, just were really good. Story was kind of, what you'd expect, for something like that. But I mean, largely was a really, really enjoyable game.
Sweet.
And one that I've gone back to a couple of times. It really did exceed the expectations that I had, and was really, really good. I wouldn't say it changed my life, but
That's fair. Now, just sorry as an aside on that. Now, you originally played it on Switch, right?
Oh, right.
oh,
And it had some issues there.
So I did a review for it on
Yeah.
Switch.
Yeah.
But our benefactors were good enough to, because the Switch release was happening while I was in the middle of my move,
Yes.
they talked with the devs about getting me a PC code so that I could
Oh, nice.
start pre-playing the story and get kind of that element of
Yep.
it. And then we got the Switch code for it. But yeah, the Switch version is very rough. It really does not play very well.
I was going to say, because you had done the Switch review, and I think I ended up doing the Steam review on that. I was actually just looking through my
you did
list to see if I
the PC review. I actually borrowed from your Steam library.
That's right. That's what it was.
Yeah, so I borrowed.
That's what it
I
was.
borrowed from your Steam library for a little bit until they came back and said, "Okay, hey, we're going to
Yeah.
give you this code so you can
That's
start
right.
playing ahead of a time."
Yes. Yeah, no, that's cool.
Which
Yeah,
that doesn't
it was a
always
really good game.
that doesn't always work out like that. That was a huge thing on behalf of the devs, and that was such a
Yes,
cool thing
they
for
were
them
great.
to do. Yeah, they were great.
They were really good. So cool, man. Thank you for sharing. Sarah, what about you?
I have a game that led me to a whole new genre.
Ooh, I'm interested.
So when you think about just a game that involves only reading,
Okay.
you would think it's like just
That's
watching a
not a
book,
game.
really. But
studying.
Danganronpa 1.
What is
was
it?
Okay.
Definitely the one that turned me on to all visual novels.
What was it?
just
Sorry, what was the title again?
Danganronpa.
Oh,
Trigger
okay.
Happy Havoc.
Cool.
It is like a murder mystery kind of thing, but the story
Interesting.
has so many twists and turns. Like, it's just the art style is amazing. The music makes me dance every time I hear it, and it is such a good, like, I would call it thriller, I guess.
Nice.
But I'm replaying it right now with my husband.
Nice.
And I'm watching. I'm like, oh, I know what happened. I'm so excited for him to play it every time. Like, we get to a twist, I'm like, oh yeah, and it's so exciting to watch him play it. So I'm gonna say
amazing.
that is my, like, I had no expectations because it's like reading a whole game. Yeah, that's
yeah.
Is that one of those things where, like, you know the moment is coming, and so you're watching him insteed of the game to see how he reacts?
Exactly. I'm staring at him. He's like, what's going on? It's like, oh no, I have to stop doing this. He's gonna know.
That's
What about you,
awesome.
Matt?
That's Oh man, so it's funny because I had told you guys beforehand, kind of, here's some ideas I was thinking for games, and then as I'm listening to your games, I'm going, oh man, there's so many games that I had zero expectation. Like Gears of War, I was like 10 years late on that one.
Yeah.
And so I had zero expectation going in because I just never enjoyed that whole concept, like, mechanically. Those games blew my mind, though. The story, like, I haven't cried in a video game like that in a really long time, and that was really good. But actually, as I was thinking through, there was a game that completely blew me away that I had zero expectation of going into, and that was Yonder, the Cloudcatcher Chronicles.
yeah.
That game just completely blew me away because it is so far removed from anything that I would play.
It's true.
You know, like I'm not an Animal Crossing guy. I'm not a Harvest Moon guy or anything like that. And those are great games. I actually wish I enjoyed those games because it sounds like you guys are having an awesome time with that.
They just so chill.
Yeah,
So
and
is
that's the
Yonder.
thing. I don't do chill games well. I think that's my problem. But Yonder was just this incredible gem of a game that completely took me by storm. The best way I can describe it is you are tasked with saving the world, but there's no combat system in this game.
Yep.
And it's this adventure exploration game where you basically go into this world and try to figure out how you're going to save everybody without ever lifting up a sword or
How did that
or a
game
gun
hold
or
your
anything.
attention?
Exactly right.
So what they did, so it's a great question because, again, like we were talking earlier, like, you know, when it comes to, like, you know, management systems, the only thing I want to manage is bullets when it comes to video games. But I think what captured me about Yonder was it was just linear enough that I wasn't super ADD. The exploration in the game was just challenging enough that I wasn't like, oh, this is so boring, but it wasn't so difficult that I was like, hey, I need to go online and use a walkthrough. Because I hate doing that. I hate having to stop playing a game to go read up on how I'm going to do a thing. To me, it breaks immersion and it just takes all the fun out of the
Makes
game for me.
sense.
So yeah, I felt like the systems they had in place, they had like a trading system where you could like go to different markets and stuff, but it wasn't a cumbersome system. Like, it didn't take a lot of extra energy to do that. So I didn't have to go off the beaten path too far to make that happen. So it was like, for me, it was just the right amount of all of these different elements coming together. Like, they kind of struck this perfect chord for me with that game, and it really had some really cool lore and stuff that, like, I'm not usually a lore guy, but the way they delivered the lore was really good. And yeah, like I was surprised by it. It gave me a whole new appreciation for that style of game that I'd never had.
Did you ever pick it up on Switch?
I do. I have it on Switch and PC, actually. Yeah, I originally picked it up on PC, and then when it dropped on Switch, I was like, oh man, I got to get this. And I did, and I've played through it a couple times on there, actually. So I think that is my chill game, actually, is Yonder, because it's like there's zero stress. It's just fun exploration and figuring stuff out. And again, for me, like, my relaxing games are things like Doom. So yeah, to switch over to like that is just a totally different stress.
So that was really not the game that I was expecting you to say.
Oh, what were you expecting?
I was actually expecting you to talk about God of War.
God of War is another one. See, there's so many good games.
Because I remember when you played that game, like you didn't play the rest of the series, and you had like zero expectation going into that, but because of the nature of like the father-son story within that game, I remember you and I just had several conversations about that. And just how that was making you look at not only your relationship with your son, but also your relationship with God as well.
Oh yeah, and again, that was another game that blew my expectations. The reason I went with Yonder over that, because that was one of the many games that went through my head, was because Yonder gave me a whole new appreciation for a genre.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. God of War is an incredible, hands down, still game of the year for me that year. But I loved that genre beforehand. Like, I did like that third person open world hack and slash, like the Darksiders and all those different types of games. Like, I really enjoy those anyway. What was so amazing about God of War was the story was just so well done and so well presented, and just like you said, they struck so many good chords with that, and it blew me out of the water. But Yonder, just like it was the leg sweep. I was on that. It got me with the leg sweep.
Fair.
But
that's fair.
But it was good. But it's interesting because we do have a tendency to build up expectations. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I want to build on that a little bit. This idea that we set up expectations in our own head of what a game should be or shouldn't be. I mean, gamers are probably some of the worst culprits for this, of getting an idea in our head about what this game should be.
Oh, and we're a fickle bunch.
Oh, we really are. It's true, because then sometimes we get exactly what we want, and then we don't like it.
That is...
arguably, that's
I was going to say, that's happening right now in Destiny. People have been, oh, absolutely. This season of Destiny, like, okay. So people have been like clamoring, like, bring back Trials of Osiris, and if you're not
really, people wanted Trials.
Well, people wanted Trials again because there was no pinnacle PvP activity. And so people were looking for that, like, end game PvP, felt like the Crucible really wasn't enough for them. And now Trials is here, and there's like botting that's going on PC. Like, there's just a bunch of like kind of crummy things that are happening with it, and like unfortunately, like, the community is like, we got Trials, but we don't like Trials, and this is boring. And I hate that for the people at Bungie. I especially hate it during the season too, where like they're trying to do their best to continue working on this game from a distance from each other. Like, they're like working. They were one of the first companies, I think, one of the first gaming companies to announce, like, hey, we're going to be working from home. We figured out how to do the satellite thing. We're still developing. But like, it's just kind of been a weird thing to watch from a distance, that just that kind of fickle, like, we had this expectation and we got the thing that we thought we wanted, and it wasn't all that we thought it was going to be.
Absolutely. And that's interesting, because I think that actually ties really well into Easter, because if we look at the death and resurrection of Christ, and we look at the concept of the Messiah that the Israelites had in their head versus who Christ the Messiah actually is, I wonder how the Israelites would have actually responded if they'd gotten the Messiah they wanted. Sometimes, just as like how that actually would have worked out for them. But I am thankful because because the Messiah that Christ is so much better than anything that we could have hoped for or expected. I mean, the Messiah that Israel wanted was this leader, this king, this warrior king that was going to come in and just level everybody else out and make Israel the centerfold of humanity. And don't get me wrong, to a degree, God had called them to be the light to the world around them, but they'd gotten so far removed from that, and they're no different than anybody else in humanity. We've all gone astray, but I'm so thankful that the Christ Messiah that we have is so much more than that, and because it allows for not just the Israelites to be saved, but for everyone to be saved, and that's huge. And Dame, I think you had a scripture.
Yeah,
you wanted to share
I
a little
do.
bit about,
I do, and I want to
this one
kind of
as well.
piggyback off of something that you said there, Matt.
Yeah.
You said that there was this expectation of salvation for Israel. But if you go back and you look at the original covenant between God and Abraham that they all go back to, and they're like, yeah, we're the children of Abraham, and kind of made this big deal of this covenantal relationship. If you look at the nature of that covenant, one of the things that God promises Abraham is that through you, all nations will be blessed. And so it isn't just like, I'm blessing you and your children. It's you're blessed to be a blessing to others, and I'm going to make your descendants as numerous as the sands on the seashores. But I'm doing this so that you guys are going to be this vehicle of delivering blessing to the nations. And so going back to this idea of the Messiah that Israel wanted versus the Messiah that they got. If they had received this conquering king, I don't think that it would have gone nearly as well for them as they thought it was going to be, especially those who are in a ruling class, especially those people that carted Jesus off to a clown trial, it would not have ended well for them. But again, I think of even the disciples' own expectations in Jesus. They were even clamoring on hey, which one of us is going to be your second in command? Which one of us is going to be how are we going to be the power brokers of this kingdom of God? And they totally missed the mark with this. But God was doing something that was so much bigger and so much different, and it was fighting a different enemy too. Israel was under Roman rule, and so there was this sense that Messiah was supposed to deliver them from this political oppression. They had years and years of exile and rulership of foreign nations. And so this was their expectation that the deliverer would deliver them from this situation. But there was a greater enemy that was there, sin and death. And in Romans chapter 5, Paul writes this. He says, "You see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly." That's you and me. That's all of humanity. And keep in mind, here's another thing with this too. This word, the ungodly, this is the antithesis of himself. Christ died for the antithesis of himself. And then Paul goes on this tangent. He says, very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. You think about that situationally, hey, if we saw a situation where somebody was put in harm's way, that's somebody that we care about, somebody that we perceive to be a good person, we'd probably put our lives on the line for that person. You guys, if there were a situation where we were all together and somebody was threatening one of you guys, I would jump into that situation because I care about you guys. He says, He says, okay, very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might dare to die. But God demonstrated his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So this ascension to power, if you will, for Jesus wasn't about ascending to a political throne. It was about fighting the enemy of his enemy. While we're sinners, I mean, that makes us enemies of God. It makes us, the holiness of God cannot coexist with sin at all. Like, that's just kind of, it's like, it's kind of the whole point of holiness. It's the absence of sin and whatnot. And so God took on this battle for us. And it's interesting because I'm preparing to share this on Sunday, and as this podcast releases, it'll be the previous Sunday.
It's true.
But I'm preparing to share this on Sunday, that when Jesus died, he takes this battle to our enemy, and what was our debt to pay was paid by him. And so, like, death, Paul would write later on that to the Corinthian church that the sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But Jesus was the maker of the law, and he was also sinless. And so when death took, there was this debt now that death owed to Jesus. And so in this thing that he did, like, he essentially fought the enemy of his enemy, won, and subjugated it to himself. And so now, like, there's this reconciliation with God. And Paul continues to write, he says, since we have now been justified by his blood, how much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through him? There had to be a payment. Sin always receives, or always puts us in debt. And it always needs to be paid. And when you have sin and holiness, like, there's this battle in between those. Holiness will always win out at the end, and so there was this tension that had to happen. But God poured his wrath out on Jesus to receive that wrath for us. And he says, for if, while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life? Not only is this so, but we also boast in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have now received reconciliation. So God was doing this thing that was so much bigger than just a simple political movement. It was so much bigger than one kingdom. It was the establishment of a new order, an establishment of a new kingdom that not only included Israel, but it would ripple out to the entirety of humanity through all of time. And that's one of those that just, that blows my mind.
It's true.
Thinking about, God being outside of time and then doing this thing in a specific moment in time, which would ripple out for generations upon generations, forward and backward. I don't understand how the backward part all works. I've got some ideas about that, but
yeah, I was gonna say, if we get start talking about like time, and
we are gonna be here all day.
We're gonna be here all day. So, but it makes me so thankful that, like, our expectations cannot compare to God's reality. Do you know what I mean? Like, I am so thankful that God is not limited by our expectation. God is not limited by what we think should happen, but rather he can do so much more. And I see it even as we're dealing with like the now, right, with all the COVID stuff happening, all the social isolation, and the copious amounts of hand washing that are happening. I've learned so much about hand washing in the last month. It's amazing. But it's funny because going into that, I think a lot of people, especially in the church, like there was just so much concern, because you're going, well, how are we supposed to continue these church services? How are we supposed to continue ministering to people and declaring the gospel truth? And I'm so thankful that God is so much bigger than our limited expectations. Right. I mean, I know even for our church, like God is just, man, he's opened the floodgates. Like it's been so good. Like the responses we've gotten, and there's been all this transitioning to online. Like God has just provided all the tools and all the things we've needed to do that. And our reach is actually, like, numerically, I think, bigger than it's ever been because we're online. And it's just like I'm just so thankful that God is not limited. By us.
I also
I mean?
think that it's incredible that God is not. He's not limited to our expectations, and he's not limited by circumstantial disaster either. Because like looking at
100%.
I'm getting ready to at this point in time as we're recording, I'm getting ready to release a video for Good Friday and answering the question of, is Good Friday good? I know we talked about that a little bit in our, previous episodes. But in that, like, think about that Easter Saturday, like that Saturday in between, like Good Friday and the resurrection. Man, like there's no Sabbath rest in there for those disciples. Like it's restless, and there's broken expectations. And how could anything good be salvaged from this? In our current situation, like I've just absolutely loved, as hard as it's been, like I've absolutely loved seeing where churches have gotten creative and the gospel is still going out. And I think that it's actually going out further because we're outside of our walls, and God is doing something that's so much bigger. He's leveraging this situation that is disastrous for a lot of people, and it's impacting a lot of people. There's a lot of loss and a lot of grieving, and I don't want to diminish any of that. But there are these things, these pockets of hope that are springing up from dead ground. And I just wonder in this next season for the church, if God is not going to do something, if God is not working out a resurrecting work for the church during this season. I'm excited to see what God is going to do through it.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. Well, guys, it's been a good conversation. I want to kind of pay attention to our time here. I was just noticing what time it was. So this is the problem. We start talking about life, God, and video games, is you could actually just talk all day. But thanks guys for sharing today. It's always fun to hear about your favorite games and things like that. And then to be able to talk about Jesus in the middle, that's always a good time too. So for our listeners, thank you so much for listening in. Tuning in every week, we really appreciate that. Make sure you're liking and subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. We do actually put these up on YouTube as well, so please jump on over to YouTube, Roll the Level, and you can actually see what our faces look like for what that's worth. Especially with my hat hair now that
it's all good,
I've
dude.
been in isolation so long. It's good. But so thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on Roll the Level.